methotrexate, we just saw in the cancer portion, is a chemotherapy agent that can cause death. It can also cause cancer. It causes ulcerations in the entire gastrointestinal tract. Now you see, these diseases are actually from nutritional deficiencies. Not getting enough of the food you need, eating too much of the food you don't need, having improper elimination, not drinking enough water. In fact, I know many patients who have gotten well from rheumatoid arthritis. In fact, many of them who have been in wheelchairs who've been able to get up from their wheelchairs and get well. Now, if you have severe permanent destruction of joints, I'm not telling you that you're going to be out dancing, but I can tell you that you can stop the progression of the disease and reverse the changes that are not permanent. My mother, as I told you before, at the age of 85, had this severe autoimmune disease called polymyalgia rheumatica, and she got well within 6 months with no drugs whatsoever, just on the plan that we will discuss later on how you can get well from virtually every disease. I interview her on this tape, You Can't Improve on God, and you will see that at the beginning she wasn't too happy about changing her diet and lifestyle. But not only did she get well from polymyalgia rheumatica, when she was terribly sick, she was unable to even dress herself and she had severe pain. But her triglycerides, which is a measure of the fat in your blood, dropped 400 points in 4 months. Her cholesterol dropped from 280 to 120. So we go back to the very same thing and see that these autoimmune diseases are really caused from malnutrition, dehydration, and stress. We will also see that sugar suppresses the immune system and can cause joint pain. Water, the lack of water, dehydration from caffeine and alcohol, can also cause joint pain. Fluoride decreases the immune system's ability to keep you free from disease. Silicone implants seem to be associated with autoimmune disease and immune suppression. Arthritis has been shown in medical literature to be caused from a diet low in nutrients. Alcohol, aspirin, and saturated fats, which are found in meat and dairy products, produce prostaglandin E2, which suppresses the immune system. Carbonated drinks are high in phosphates, which change the mineral balance of the body. And a lack of exercise also can cause you to have stiffness in your joints and not get enough oxygen to your entire body. It's not a mystery why people get sick. It's the same thing with autoimmune disease as it is with cancer and heart disease. We give these diseases to ourselves. Drugs never cure disease. They only change the former location of the disease by causing side effects. These are diseases of the neurological system. Parkinson's, of course, you can develop what we call a pill-rolling tremor and have a shuffling gait and actually sort of turn to stone, and eventually it affects the brain. Huntington's disease is very similar to that. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also called Lou Gehrig's disease, where you have involvement of your nervous system starting at the lower portion of your body, and eventually it gets up to your lungs and your throat, and you can choke to death. And it's considered to be 100% fatal. Multiple sclerosis is a disease of the muscles, but just think about this. All of these diseases have these strange names. Multiple just means many, and sclerosis means hard parts. It's just got many hard parts in the muscle. It doesn't really tell you what causes the disease. Alzheimer's is, of course, dementia, but it's just named after the person that first described this kind of dementia. And again, these titles only are Latin terms for describing the symptoms. They don't tell you what causes the disease. And then seizures are also a part of these neurological abnormalities. Well, how do they treat these? Prednisone is one of the main things they use to treat, and we've just gone through the side effects of prednisone or cortisone. They're very destructive. With Huntington's, they use phenothiazines, which all have side effects. With Parkinson's, they use certain drugs that have side effects of restlessness, confusion, depression, edema, nausea, constipation, anorexia. These are things that are very destructive to a Parkinson's patient, you see. They already have a serious problem, and now they have confusion and possibly hallucinations from their drugs. Some of the drugs, the anticholinergic drugs they put them on, cause nausea, constipation, palpitations, and you see, all of these diseases are made worse by a person not being able to eliminate their weight. So anytime they're taking drugs that cause constipation, you're going to be worse off. Levodopa, which is used in Parkinson's patients, causes nausea, vomiting, hypotension, cardiac arrhythmias, confusion, tremor and tics and restlessness. And of course, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, there's a drug that's used to treat that, where one of the adverse reactions is attempted suicide. It can also cause massive infection, ulcers in the gastrointestinal tract, bleeding in the gastrointestinal tract, hallucinations, delusions, stupor, delirium, psychosis, lung cancer, heart attack, congestive heart failure. The list goes on. And then when we get down to seizures, Dilantin is one of the main drugs of choice for seizures. Now again, I'm telling you, when you're on these drugs, don't stop them abruptly, because if you stop something like Dilantin rapidly and abruptly, you can go into a constant seizure, which is called status epilepticus. But the side effects of Dilantin are lymphoma, which is cancer, Hodgkin's disease, which is cancer, slurred speech, ataxia, which is an unstable gait, mental confusion, decreased coordination, dizziness, insomnia, motor twitchings, headache, in other kinds of things called dyskinesias, where suddenly your arms and hands do strange things and you can't control them, liver damage, nausea and vomiting, constipation, hepatitis, and blood formation suppression. In other words, your bone marrow is suppressed. You can see that these drugs do not cure these diseases. In fact, they make them worse. You have a short-term gain because some of your symptoms are decreased for a long-term disaster. What causes these diseases? Well, Parkinson's is contributed strongly by these excitotoxins. Remember, I talked about them. They are the MSG and the NutraSweet or aspartame. Also, dehydration makes Parkinson's much worse, and there is some suggestion that the use of caffeine can actually contribute to Parkinson's because it upsets the nervous system. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis has been shown by medical studies to have an association with, yes, milk, cow's milk. Also, the excitotoxins make this much worse, dehydration, and possibly also caffeine and sugar because they unbalance the nervous system so much. Multiple sclerosis has had tremendous improvement with drinking huge amounts of water and eliminating dairy products. Alzheimer's disease seems to be contributed largely by excitotoxins, again MSG and aspartame, NutraSweet. Dehydration is associated with Alzheimer's and with brain atrophy. You see, the brain is 85% water, and it weighs about 3.5 pounds in an adult. If you squeeze all the water out of it, it only weighs 10 ounces. There's an article in the medical literature where they talk about they can't figure out why this person has brain atrophy, and when they are on high blood pressure drugs, actually the brain atrophy does not get better. They've associated brain atrophy with people who have high blood pressure. Well, it's because they put people with high blood pressure on diuretics. Diuretics takes water out of your body. You need to have water in your body in order to decrease your hypertension, because when you have hypertension, it's because your body knows it doesn't have enough water, and it produces a chemical that will actually constrict your arteries to make sure that you have enough blood to go and around and fill all of your vascular channels. Because when you don't have enough water, You don't make enough serum to have enough blood volume. So when you get high blood pressure, you've got thicker blood that's being pushed through narrower channels because your body has produced certain chemicals like histamine, vasopressin, and renin-angiotensin. These constrict the arteries. So your blood has to pump thicker blood through narrower arteries. If you have high blood pressure, what you want to do is drink more water. If you have Alzheimer's disease, what you want to do is drink more water, and that's, of course, a great way to prevent it. Also, the aluminum in antacids that people take for ulcers seems to be associated with the onset of Alzheimer's, and so does a high-fat diet, because the fat clogs up the arteries, and then the brain can't get enough oxygen. Seizures seem to be intensified by sugar in the diet, by the excitotoxins, MSG and aspartame, by food additives, by a lack of nutrition, and by a lack of water, dehydration, and possibly caffeine. These are problems that many women have. Fibrocystic breast disease is accentuated by having caffeine in the diet. Now that's not only from coffee and caffeinated soda, but there is a caffeine-like compound in tea and in chocolate. So all of these things must be eliminated. Also, fibrocystic breast disease is increased by a high-fat diet. Any tumors, whether benign or malignant, are abnormal. By getting your body back in balance, by eating right, by living right, your body can get rid of those tumors. You don't have to always have them cut out. Menopausal hot flashes. I had terrible hot flashes. I tried to get off my estrogen replacement therapy many times, but I would have such hot flashes I couldn't stand them. But when I found out I had breast cancer, I knew I had to stop those estrogens immediately. And I was dreading what would happen to me when I stopped the estrogens. But as soon as I changed my diet to a totally vegan diet, no meat, no dairy products, no eggs, no poultry, no fish, I never had another hot flash. And of course you want to drink a lot of water as well. There are some herbs that are helpful in decreasing menopausal hot flashes, such as dong quai, blue cohosh, black cohosh, wild yam root, fennel, and licorice root. However, I think that what we should do is try to get our body back in balance and not even use herbs as drugs. If you decrease the fat and the protein in your diet and you eat a natural diet, almost always the hot flashes will go away. But you say, well, I don't want to get osteoporosis and my doctor tells me I've got to be on estrogens. Well, osteoporosis is not caused by a deficiency of estrogen. In fact, as we discussed before, osteoporosis is caused mainly by lack of activity and too much protein in the diet, particularly too much animal protein. So if you will get your diet down to eating less than 40 grams of protein a day, then you won't get osteoporosis. Of course, you want to also eliminate the medications like cortisone that cause osteoporosis, and of course smoking causes osteoporosis and caffeine contributes to it. So you want to rectify those factors, but you need to get exercise and you need to get the proper amount of protein in the diet. You don't want to keep taking calcium because osteoporosis is not a calcium deficiency per se. What happens, as I said, is that when you eat too much protein or you drink too much milk, the body becomes very acid and it has to take the calcium out of your bones to neutralize the acid. Now, a lot of women say, well, my doctor has put me on Fosamax. Well, if you go to the physician's desk reference again, the PDR, the big red book, you will find that Fosamax causes ulcers of the esophagus, abdominal pain and gastritis, that's inflammation of the stomach, bone, muscle, and joint pain, headache, dizziness, and acid regurgitation of your food. Fosamax will not cure your osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is not due to a deficiency of Fosamax. What it is due to a deficiency of the proper nutrients, and you want to get rid of the excess bad food in your diet. Now, infertility can be rectified by the total plan that we're going to talk about. Male and female mice exposed to MSG early in life actually suffered from infertility in laboratory experiments. There is some evidence that fluoride, particularly fluoride in the water and in toothpaste, contributes to the infertility problem, and also a lack of antioxidants. Well, the antioxidants should be in the food that you eat, not necessarily in supplements, because those aren't natural. The nausea of pregnancy is in large part caused by dehydration. When a woman gets pregnant, her body has to take huge amounts of water from her cells to form all the amniotic fluid for the baby. When you get dehydrated, you can get nauseated. So you want to make sure that if you're contemplating becoming pregnant, make sure that you are drinking lots of water, your body is well hydrated, and that you are eating proper nutrition. And then premenstrual syndrome. Actually, this is also truly cured by getting your body back in balance, by getting the stress out of your life, drinking lots of water, exercising, and eating an all-natural diet. Estrogen replacement therapy, as we talked about for menopausal hot flashes or to try to prevent osteoporosis, these cause cancer of the uterus, breast cancer, abnormal blood clotting, nausea and vomiting, enlargement of uterine fibroids, and sometimes spotty darkening of the skin, particularly skin of the face. These things are easily solvable by getting yourself back on schedule, getting the body back in balance. They are never solved by drugs. It seems like everybody's suffering from some kind of joint pain or back pain or neck pain. Osteoarthritis is somewhat different from rheumatoid arthritis. At least we doctors categorize it differently. But all of these really play into the same factors that cause them. Osteoarthritis and back pain and neck pain are basically due to inactivity, the wrong diet, and not enough water. You see, water is necessary to make synovial fluid. That's a special kind of fluid that the body makes to nourish the joint surfaces. When the joint surfaces get too dry, they wear out, and they can cause back pain and neck pain. But you can rehydrate those joint surfaces if they're not too bad. Sciatica is pain down the back of the buttock and down the leg, and is caused generally from a herniated disc or a slipped disc. That's because the discs are dehydrated, because people are not drinking enough water and the discs aren't being nourished enough by proper exercise. I had severe disc problems before I understood my need for water. I actually had them operated on a number of years ago, and then the pain came back. And when I moved to a hotter climate and I wasn't drinking enough water, my pain got severe. But as soon as I started drinking large amounts of water, over a number of months I was able to rehydrate the discs. And actually the discs plump up and they stop pressing against the nerve roots. You know, as women particularly get older, they get shorter. Well, how do they do that? It's because their discs collapse in between their vertebrae. But you can rehydrate those discs and increase their size and increase your ability not only to move about and have freedom from pain, but you can move that disc out of the way by its rehydration and plumping up so it's not pressing against the nerve root. Sugar also causes joint pain. It suppresses the immune system. It is very dehydrating, and you need the water for your nourishment of your joint surfaces. Caffeine is dehydrating. Alcohol is dehydrating. And of course, a lack of exercise, your joints get stiff if you don't move them. Lack of nutrients also can cause these diseases. You have to eat right. And sunlight gives you vitamin D to give you strong bones. Cortisone and the anti-inflammatory drugs will always make these things eventually worse, because even though they cover up the symptoms to begin with, they cause worse problems down the line. So what you want to do is the same old song. Eat right, exercise, and get rid of the stress in your life. And we'll show you how to do that total plan in just a minute. There's an increasing body of evidence to confirm that the onset of diabetes type 1, that's juvenile onset diabetes, is associated with the use of cow's milk and other dairy products in very young children. Even if you use insulin throughout life, that will not stop the progression of the disease. The disease is a disease of blood vessels. These people can become blind, they can have terrible ulcers of their feet and actually lose their feet or lose their legs. What we need to do is eliminate all sugar, because you see sugar also intensifies the diabetes. We should remove all excitotoxins, the MSG and aspartame, and all chemicals from the processed food. Smoking makes diabetes of any type much worse. We must institute a diet rich in vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. And I have seen people with diabetes type 1 who have been able to reduce their insulin dosage tremendously. Once the cells in the pancreas have been destroyed, I have not seen them revive and regenerate. But you can reduce your insulin dosage tremendously and be a lot healthier. But the most important thing is to try to prevent the onset of juvenile diabetes, which is by eating healthy and eliminating cow's milk from all diets. Now, diabetes type 2 is easily removed by eating a healthy diet. Even your doctor will tell you that if you eat fruits, grains, and vegetables, and you eat a low-fat diet and eliminate the sugar, that you can, and exercise, of course, that you can eliminate diabetes type 2. That's very important because the drugs they put you on to treat diabetes type 2, or adult-onset diabetes, one of them is glucotrol, also called glipizide, which comes with a special warning on it. It says there is an increase of cardiovascular mortality, which means heart attack. It can kill you, plus it causes nausea, diarrhea, jaundice, anemia, low white blood cell count, and low platelets, which are associated with clotting, dizziness, headache, and drowsiness. Another drug that's commonly used is called glucophage, which has almost the same side effects, including this increased risk of cardiovascular mortality, which is death. So what you want to do is get on your proper diet, the same song. Now, hypoglycemia is really caused mainly by eating too much refined sugar. When you bring that sugar into your body, it's a big jolt, like you've taken a hit of cocaine or something, and your insulin shoots up. Well, then your insulin eats up all that sugar, and then you become hypoglycemic, and you become shaky and nervous and irritable and all of that. And when people tell me they have hypoglycemia, I know almost always what's happened. They're eating too much refined sugar in their diet. So if we exercise, if we eat right, if we eat fruits, grains, and vegetables and get the fat, the high protein, and the sugar out of our diet, plus drink lots of water, we can certainly get rid of diabetes type 2, and it looks like we can prevent diabetes type 1 and hypoglycemia. Well, as we've learned, headaches are not caused by a deficiency of aspirin. Migraine headaches are not caused by a deficiency of drugs. Headaches are caused by the excitotoxins, MSG and aspartame, milk producing allergies, poor elimination due to dehydration from caffeine and alcohol and not eating enough raw food, dehydration from not drinking enough water, stress, of course, leads into this as well, and stress is very dehydrating. Sugar withdrawal can actually cause not only headaches but migraine headaches. Caffeine withdrawal can cause headaches. So you see, if you eat your balanced diet, if you eat fruits, grains, and vegetables, you can eliminate these problems. Chronic fatigue syndrome. I think everybody seems to be suffering from that. This is caused by sleep disturbances, and sleep disturbances are caused by stress, not drinking enough water, and eating the wrong foods over a long period of time. Sugar causes the ability for candida to grow in your intestine, and this contributes to chronic fatigue syndrome. This is a fungus that can grow in your intestine, and it can get into your bloodstream. This candida is increased by the use of birth control pills or any estrogens, and also the use of steroids, cortisone, and antibiotics, because antibiotics will wipe out the good bacteria in your colon so the candida can overgrow, possibly get into your bloodstream, and contribute to chronic fatigue syndrome. Also, it's contributed to by poor elimination, by dehydration, by lack of exercise, and by a lack of nutrients, not getting enough vitamins and minerals into your body, and in fact eating too much fat and protein. And also sleep disturbances, as I said before, has been shown to cause chronic fatigue syndrome. Now, how about fibromyalgia? Fibromyalgia is increased by too much sugar in the diet, poor elimination, lack of exercise, the excitotoxins, MSG and aspartame, too much fat and protein in the diet. And again, it has been shown that you can take a healthy person and by purposely disturbing their sleep over a period of 3 nights, you can have induce symptoms of fibromyalgia, which is pain and discomfort in the muscles and sometimes in the joints as well, and a feeling of fatigue and weakness. Now, candidiasis, as I told you, plays into all of these others and is produced by overgrowth of this particular bacteria or fungus in the intestine, and by the use of antibiotics, by the use of too much sugar. Flu and colds we can include in this group too, because all it is the result of is suppression of the immune system. If your immune system is working properly, you're not going to get flu and the colds. They did a study once where they took a number of volunteers and they took pure cold virus and put it right up into their nose, and they put their feet in cold water and blew cold drafts on them. And only something like 15% of the people got a cold, because it had to do with how well their immune system was operating at the time they were exposed. You know that sometimes you can be around a person who has a cold and you will get it, and sometimes you won't. All we have to do is keep our immune systems working properly by feeding them right, by doing all the right natural things that we've talked about, and we can eliminate all of these problems. Now, they don't happen immediately. It doesn't happen that you get well within a few days. This takes months. You see, we get sick one day at a time. It takes us years to get into this situation. It may take a year or 18 months of really hard duty in obeying all of the right rules, the 10 laws of health, for us to get out of this problem. When the body is dehydrated, a water regulating mechanism is triggered. The body produces histamine, which is the #1 water regulator. It makes sure that the brain and the vital organs get enough water. But what you see, when histamine is produced in your body, then you want to have antihistamines. And you go to the drugstore, you go to your doctor, and you get antihistamines. But what you really need is water, because the body produces histamine because it doesn't have enough water in it. You need lots of water. There are also some common causes of allergies, which include dairy products, milk, cheese, butter, cottage cheese, yogurt, and sugar. All of these things cause allergies. Also, there is an association with asthma, allergies, and bronchitis, not only with dehydration, a lack of water, but with fluoride, with MSG, aspartame, medications. Many medications cause constriction of the bronchi. They can cause other allergies, and they can cause asthma. Fats and fried foods decrease immune function, and animal products cause an increase in mucus formation, which can make these problems worse. Now, they frequently treat these diseases, such as asthma, with something called Ceravent, which causes heart palpitations, nausea and vomiting, abdominal pain, joint and back pain, muscle aches, nervousness, and fatigue. And another one called Asthmacort causes facial edema, abdominal pain, vomiting, joint pains and muscle pains, toothache, chest congestion, voice alteration, and urinary and vaginal infection. Sugar is irritating to the mucous membranes and leaches the body's calcium reserves, generally lowering your resistance. Smoking, of course, is bad for all of these things, And the drugs that the doctor may give you have cortisone in them, and this suppresses your immune system even more. So you see, what you really need to do if you have these three problems, any one of the three, is you have to increase your water so you can turn off the histamine system in your body. Your body knows it needs water, so it produces histamine. Don't use antihistamines. Drink water and get the dairy products out of your body. All of these gastrointestinal diseases have basically the same cause, with maybe the exception of gallstones. Gallstones are really caused from too much fat in the diet primarily. But constipation and hemorrhoids and diverticulosis and Crohn's disease of the colon, these are due to not enough water, not too much fat in the diet, too much high protein, which goes through and is stored as fat. These kind of things all cause problems with your intestinal elimination. When you are constipated, this can cause hemorrhoids. If you have ulcerative colitis, these are frequently exacerbated, these diseases, by stress. Diverticulosis is when food gets caught in little pockets in your intestine, and these pockets are caused because your intestinal contents are not moving out of your body fast enough. Irritable bowel syndrome is caused by an increase in stress, not eating the right food, not drinking enough water. So what you want to do with each of these, instead of taking steroids, cortisone for this disease, and sometimes for this disease, you want to change the way you're eating, change the way you're living, get exercise, drink water, eat a proper diet without too much fat and without all the sugar that you've been eating. And of course, gastric and duodenal ulcers can actually be cured by drinking water. Now, your doctor may say you need a bland diet, but it is the water that is necessary to produce the mucus to line your stomach so the acid in your stomach does not eat through into the lining. When you do that, in fact, you can cure ulcers. 2,000 cases of ulcer have actually been cured by nothing more than water. This has been reported in 1983 in the Journal of Clinical Gastroenterology. So these things are, even though they can be serious problems, if you get on the right diet, if you drink a lot of water, and if you get the stress out of your life, these can miraculously go away. Well, you probably have a good idea of what you need to do to get well. We're going to formulate that plan now, and I'm going to give you a lot of resource material. The books and tapes that I'm going to show you will all have ordering information on the end of the video. You don't order them from me. You order them from the same place I got them, and these were very helpful in my recovery from cancer, and they've been very helpful in the recovery of other people from many different kinds of diseases. First of all, nutrition. What do we eat? We eat fruits, grains, and vegetables in their most natural form. We want to eliminate the dairy products, the meat, the poultry, the eggs, the fish, all of these animal products, because they all contain disease, they all contain hormones and antibiotics and pesticides and things like that, which make you sick. Not only that, they contain carcinogens when you cook the meat. One excellent book is called Move Over Milk, and it shows you how there is a relationship between diabetes and osteoporosis and these neurologic diseases that we talked about. It is excellent. It gives you all the documentation in the medical literature for why milk is very harmful for you. Then there is the book Mad Cows and Milkgate. This is written by a medical doctor, and it shows you that mad cow disease actually is in this country, the country of America, and how it got here and how you can protect yourself. There's another book on NutraSweet, aspartame, written also by a medical doctor, Dr. H.J. Roberts, showing all of the problems with aspartame. The FDA approved this knowing that it contained this product called methanol, which can cause blindness and can cause convulsions. And then there's a book, Excitotoxins. The book was written by Dr. Russell Blaylock, who is a neurosurgeon. This book will tell you how MSG and aspartame, including hydrolyzed vegetable protein and natural flavorings, which frequently contain MSG, can make you sick. They can cause brain tumors, they can cause seizures, they contribute to Parkinson's disease and Lou Gehrig's disease. So what do you eat? How do you change over from this meat-based diet, this animal flesh-based diet, to a vegan diet or to fruits, grains, and vegetables? Well, I am including in ordering information at the end of this tape how you can get some cookbooks and some raw food preparation books which will help you. This one is called Edie Mae's Natural Recipes, which tells you how to prepare raw food that has all the enzymes in it. You see, when you cook food, you destroy all the enzymes. Anything that's heated to above 107 or 110 degrees will destroy all the enzymes. It's been found that if they feed cats food that is cooked within about 4 generations, they can no longer produce and the breed will die out. Here's another book called Absolutely Vegetarian, where you can have excellent recipes that are made from fruits, grains, and vegetables with no dairy and no eggs and certainly no meat, poultry, or fish. Another excellent book is Recipes for Life, written by Rhonda Malkmus, and this is Recipes from God's Garden. Again, no milk, no eggs, no flesh foods, only fruits, grains, and vegetables. There are also many raw food recipes in this recipe book as well. So this is a way for you to start. You can start changing over gradually if you're just looking for a better lifestyle. But if you have a serious disease, as I had with my cancer, you better change over all at once. And you might say, well, I don't like to eat that way. Well, what does that have to do with it if you want to be well? Now, the next thing is you have to start exercising. Exercise is the second law of health. If you have back problems, you want to really start exercising as much as you can right off the bat. Now, if you have too much pain, then you better start drinking a whole lot of water. But exercise will help you eliminate your back and joint pain. This is a book by an MD, Dr. Batman Gelage. And this is a video that goes along with it that will show you how you can rehydrate and expand the discs in your back. And of course, you need exercise for just your general body health. The next thing is water. If you don't drink enough water, your body can't function. If your children go out and play in the mud, and they come in and they have filthy clothes, and you put their clothes in the washing machine, and you pour in 2 cups of water and turn on the machine, how clean will the clothes get? Well, that's the way with your body. Your body produces waste products in the cells. If you don't drink enough water, it can't get those waste products out of the cells, and then the cells become sick and cause you problems. So this book, Your Body's Many Cries for Water, now it has a new cover just recently that they had put on a new cover, but it's the same book. This is also written by Dr. Batman Gelage and was very, very critical in my recovery from cancer, and it is very important in every disease. The next thing is sunlight. We've got nutrition, exercise, water, and now sunlight. Sunlight is important for curing and improving every disease known to man. Once you start nourishing your body properly by eating right and drinking enough water, you will not be vulnerable to the harmful rays of the sun. Now, I'm not saying get out there and get fried and get out there at the hottest time of the day. You have to use some common sense. But this is an excellent book showing how every part of your body is affected by sunlight. Then we have to get rid of the sugar, get rid of the alcohol and the tobacco and all of the things that are harmful to our bodies. That's the next law, which is called temperance. And of course, fresh air. Fresh air is absolutely essential for the body. Without it, your body cannot function properly. And rest. Rest at the proper time of night. You cannot force your body to work past its capacity and expect to be well. The only time the body can repair itself or regenerate itself is when you are sleeping. If you have a serious disease, you should be in bed by 9 o'clock. Try to go to bed soon after the sun goes down and get up when the sun comes up. However, if you are sick with a serious disease, you need to rest a great deal. In fact, those of you who have cancer or other serious diseases, when you exercise, of course, walking is the very best exercise. Do not exercise to the point of fatigue. You have to conserve your energy, and you're breaking down your body if you're actually exercising too much. So we have nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, which means get the bad things out, fresh air, proper rest, and then, of course, the most important of all, the way to get rid of stress, and that is trust in God. This is the user's and owner's manual for your body. Your body was created by God. He also created the food that you eat. You see, I eat designer food. I eat the food that is designed by the same being that designed my body. And the food is given to us with all the right nutrients, with all the right enzymes in it for us to eat. And of course, it's best the way God made it, and that is raw. Well, we want to have it cooked, so we take all the nutrition out of it. But really, if we follow this book, we will find out how to get rid of anger. We will find out how to love our enemies. We will find out how to get rid of grudges and learn to forgive. You see, when we are stressed, when we are angry, when we are holding grudges, our bodies cannot assimilate the food even if we put good food into it, because our intestines don't work right, and the peristalsis stops, and our stomachs are contracted, and our brain cannot function properly when we are all tied up with these wrong emotions. And then the last two steps are an attitude of gratitude. Be thankful for what you've got, and of course, benevolence. Help other people. Get outside yourself. Stop being so self-centered. Stop honing in on only your problems, and learn to help other people, take care of them, and have an interest in them. If you spend time with the Lord in Bible study and prayer every morning, and I spend an hour a day because I need it. In fact, I have found that people who do not spend time with the Lord are unable to get rid of the stress in their lives. Stress is killing us. It is one of the biggest killers. And in fact, 2 Christian psychiatrists have said that the #1 cause of death in America is suppressed anger. We have to get rid of it. We have to let it go. We have to learn how to live with other people. We have to learn how not to be angry. All the stress that's happening around us is making us sick. We're not meant to live like this. If you follow these 10 steps of health, you can be well.
decades, scientists have advanced the evolutionary theory of origins. Of an Earth that formed by slow cooling of molten mass over 4.5 billion years to make the foundation rocks of the continents, the granites. Of life that began spontaneously in some primeval sea and then evolved over hundreds of millions of years to produce the many life forms we see on the Earth today. Of the eons-long formation and drying up of these primeval seas to produce sedimentary rocks such as in the Grand Canyon, with the canyon itself carved by the Colorado River over millions of years. Of coal and oil deposits, buried in sedimentary rocks around the world, which presumably required millions upon millions of years to form from the accumulation and decomposition of vegetation existing in ages past. But have scientists considered all the evidence in arriving at their theory of an anciently evolving Earth? What if there was evidence in the granites themselves that showed they formed rapidly instead of by slow cooling? What if there was evidence that these sedimentary formations composing the Grand Canyon were deposited quickly instead of slowly? What if there was evidence the canyon itself was carved over a short time by rapid erosional processes? What if there was evidence revealing that coal and oil can form rapidly and did so recently? What if there was evidence that dinosaurs existed not millions of years ago, but just a few thousand years ago? And what if it was found that natural laws, the glue which holds the evolutionary framework together, cannot explain everything in Earth history? We would then be forced to consider another model of Earth history, one that would acknowledge the possibility that geological rates of change in the past were much greater than those observed today. In this scenario, it would take much less time for various geological events to occur. We would then have all the ingredients for concluding that the Earth is actually quite young. But is there any published scientific evidence which challenges the evolutionary view of an ancient Earth and supports a young Earth? Scientist Dr. Robert Gentry, while working at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, has found just that, publishing evidence which challenges the long time period of Earth's history. In 1977, the Research Communications Network published a special breakthrough report on the results of Dr. Gentry's scientific publications, characterizing their implications as follows. Current physical laws may not have governed the past. Earth's primordial crustal rocks, rather than cooling and solidifying over millions of years, crystallized almost instantaneously. Some geological formations thought to be 100 million years old are in reality only several thousand years old. Grant these propositions and any researcher will tell you the entire structure of the historical natural sciences would dissolve into formlessness. Few certainties would remain. Yet these very possibilities, and others equally challenging, have been suggested in a remarkable series of papers published over the past several years in the world's foremost scientific journals, Nature, Science, and Annual Review of Nuclear Science, among others. From Research Communications Network, Breakthrough Report 1977. Part of Dr. Gentry's work referred to in this quote pertained to his work with coalified wood from what is known as the Colorado Plateau, a broad geographical region encompassing parts of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. Using the microscope and more advanced laboratory equipment, he analyzed these specimens of coalified wood for various types of radioactivity. His results help us to understand how long it takes coal to form, the age of the coal, and the age of the Earth itself.
Earth's vast energy resources. Before we can answer the question as to the age of coal and the time of its formation, we need to ask the question, where did coal come from? Here in this coal mine in Price, Utah, we have the answer. Here is a log, almost completely turned to coal. There are thousands of such logs in this mine and in other mines here in the Price area. This fact tells us that given the right conditions of pressure and temperature and water and time, that wood and other vegetation will turn to coal. The question is, how long did it take for that to happen?
Robert Gentry and his son David, an associate in his father's work, explore this topic together.
To answer this question, we need to look at coalified wood specimens from uranium mines instead of coalified wood, like this log, from one of the coal mines here in the Price, Utah area. This coalified wood specimen comes from La Salle, Utah, a uranium mine. Its presumed geologic age is around 140 million years.
This specimen of coalified wood comes from a uranium mine in the Temple Mountain area here in Utah. Its presumed age is also 140 million years. But look how closely this specimen resembles this other piece of wood. They're nearly identical. It's interesting to note that this other piece of wood was derived from a fresh piece of wood like this, just a few weeks ago.
This close similarity raises an important question. Is it really true that this piece of coalified wood from La Salle, Utah, and this piece of coalified wood from Temple Mountain, Utah, are really 140 million years older than this piece of wood, which David and I recently obtained in some of our experiments? Not really. Locked in these and other coalified wood specimens from uranium mines is some remarkable evidence that tells quite a different story. To see that evidence requires that the coalified wood specimens be mounted in epoxy, thinly sliced, then placed on glass slides for observation under the microscope. Under the microscope can be seen discolorations produced by radioactive particles ejected from tiny centers. Some are circular, others are elliptical, as can be seen in these photographs. These circular and elliptical halos required a special sequence of events to form, so special, in fact, that they completely overthrow the idea of an ancient age of coal, pointing instead to coal's recent formation, geologically speaking. To explain the halos requires that at one time, water-saturated logs were buried in what are now considered to be several different geologic formations: the Eocene, Jurassic, and Triassic. Later, uranium solutions infiltrated those water-saturated logs, and uranium decay products, radioactivity, was collected at tiny sites in each of those logs. That radioactivity decayed over the next several months to a half year, injecting particles and producing spherical radiation damaged regions, halos around those tiny sites. In cross-section, they appear to be circular. They were formed by the decay of secondary polonium, derived from the decay of uranium. Then there was a compression event. Something applied pressure to the top of all these formations. The logs were compressed, and when the logs were compressed, the halos were compressed. This brings us to an important point. We know that these logs had not turned to coal at the time the compression occurred. Here's a piece of coal. Coal doesn't compress. It shatters, as we can easily see. All the information we've seen thus far would indicate that these events were simultaneous in all these geologic formations. But there is even more evidence of that. When uranium invaded the wood, it left some of its decay product since the time that it invaded the wood. I've measured both the amount of uranium in these coalified logs and also the amount of lead, the decay product. On the assumption that the decay of uranium to lead has been uniform, it's an assumption we'll discuss later, we arrive at the conclusion that all these logs were buried together quite recently. How recently? In 1976, I published my results of the studies on these logs in the October 15, 1976 issue of Science. Here's what I said in this report. Such extraordinary values, referring to these lead-uranium ratios, admit the possibility that both the initial uranium infiltration and coalification could possibly have occurred within the past several thousand years. In other words, I was suggesting that coal could form very rapidly, geologically speaking. It contradicted the conventional way in which people have thought about the formation of coal. What was the reaction of the scientific community to this new data? I received a letter from Professor Raphael Kazman of Louisiana State University several months later, January 27, 1977. Dear Dr. Gentry, I have been patiently scanning the letters section of Science since the publication by you and your colleagues of your findings on radio halos. The silence is deafening. I think it can be interpreted as stunned silence. Your results will not greatly trouble the engineer, but the impact on the science of geology in possibly changing the accepted views as to the duration of geologic time will be felt for many years. Very truly yours, Raphael Kazman. Soon thereafter, Professor Kazman organized a symposium. It was entitled, It's About Time, 4.5 billion years. Is the Earth really 4.5 billion years old? When the results of the symposium were written up and published in the September 1978 issue of GeoTimes, here's what was said. However, since the deposits from which the coalified wood was obtained are considered to be at least of Cretaceous age and possibly of Jurassic or Triassic age, the ratio between uranium-238 and lead-206 should be low. Instead, some such halos have been found with uranium-lead ratios ranging from about 2,200 to over 64,000. If isotope ratios are to be used as a basis for geologic dating, then presently accepted ages may be too high by a factor of 10,000, admitting the possibility that the ages of the formation are to be measured in millennia. Translated, that means several thousand years for the formation of coal and all of those geologic formations. This information has remained unchallenged and unrefuted in the open scientific literature since it was published in 1976. We are therefore entitled to draw some rather firm conclusions about the data. Geologists have assumed the Eocene was about 60 million years ago, the Cretaceous about 110 million years ago, the Jurassic 160 million years ago, and the Triassic 225 million years ago. But the results that we presented contradict that information. It's showing instead the simultaneous burial of all these formations about several thousand years ago. These results pertain to the origin and age of coal wherever it is found.
Catherine Hill Bay, Australia. Not far from this coastal area near Flat Rocks Point is an object of extreme geological interest, an ancient tree. The fossilized remains of this tree can be seen extending through over 12 feet of sedimentary layers between two coal seams located here. Years ago, when a mining company excavated the layers exposing the tree, the bottom of the tree could be seen extending down to the lower coal seam. Since that time, the lower part of the tree has broken off. Even now, in its reduced length, The tree extends through layers geologists normally theorize to have taken hundreds of thousands of years to accumulate. But these layers could not have taken long ages to accumulate because the tree would have rotted long before the sediments would have had time to accumulate around it. Rather, this tree is mute testimony to its catastrophic burial by at least 2 sequences of volcanic ash deposits. As the evidence indicates, the tree was probably buried in a series of closely spaced volcanic ash flows, perhaps similar to the catastrophic burial of thousands of trees at Mount St. Helens in Washington state.
But if coal did form rapidly, we expect to find places where geologists have encountered extreme difficulties in explaining its origin by slow accumulation of vegetation. So let's take a closer look at the evidence for coal formation as it occurs in the spectacular Powder River Basin in Wyoming and Montana.
The Amex Eagle Butte open pit mine near Gillette, Wyoming, exposes the vast coal reserves made visible by the strip mining methods used here. The Eagle Butte mine boasts of coal layers or seams with thicknesses ranging up to 120 feet. Eagle Butte mine is part of a much larger coal-rich area known as the Powder River Basin. This gigantic 10,000 square mile reserve, situated between the Black Hills of South Dakota on the east and the Bighorn Mountains on the west, extends northward to the Yellowstone River in Montana and southward to Casper, Wyoming. The immensity of the Powder River Basin coal deposits has attracted the attention of geologists for decades. Such interest was documented in the May 1993 issue of Earth magazine. The article, Powder River Coal, Geologic Enigma, Environmental Dilemma, included these statements. Powder River's coal seams run remarkably thick and unsullied by other material. Usually unwanted sediment such as clay washes over a deposit before coal seams can get very thick. But Powder River coal is packed in immense strips, some more than 200 feet thick. These seams stretch vast distances up and down the basin. They're hundreds of miles long. They're 50 miles wide, says James McClurg, a geologist at the University of Wyoming. They're not little pods of an acre or two. They're immense things. McClurg, who studied the basin for more than a decade, says no other place in the world has as many seams 50 feet or more thick. But the Powder River Basin is not only an economic resource. To geologists, it's also an intriguing scientific enigma. Geologists have been studying the basin for more than a century, largely to answer a baffling question. How did the seams get so massive? Or more precisely, why weren't the seams diluted by influxes of clay and other impurities before they thickened? As McClurg puts it, how on earth did things remain constant enough so that you can get 200 feet of coal? The genesis of any kind of coal demands a precise sequence of events, however. If you don't get all of them, you don't get coal, explains McClurg. And to get seams more than 200 feet thick, low in impurities and low in sulfur, is a remarkable achievement. He adds, it would be like blindfolding yourself, spinning around and hitting the center of a dartboard 100 times in a row.
But if coal did not form slowly, is there any laboratory evidence showing that it can form rapidly?
In this demonstration, Robert and David Gentry begin to answer this question.
Earlier we took a piece of wood like this, inserted it in this steel pipe, added some water, and then sealed it up. The next step is to put it in the oven at about 160 degrees centigrade for 2 weeks. Now we're ready to examine the results of this experiment.
we can see, this wood is now darker in color. It's also softer. A chemical reaction between the steam and the wood under pressure has caused these changes to occur. This specimen isn't coal yet, but clearly the process of coalification has begun.
The question is, would coal result if this experiment, or a variation of it, continued for a longer period of time?
Scientists at Argonne National Laboratory have answered this question in a series of experiments performed in the 1980s. One of the earliest reports about their work appeared in the magazine Chemical and Engineering News in the November 21, 1983 issue. On page 42 of this issue, we read the following quote: "Chemists at Argonne National Laboratory have succeeded in making a type of artificial coal from naturally occurring materials. The process is much less severe than formerly thought to be necessary and provides some new insights into coal structure and how to alter it." Later, after their published reports appeared in the science journal Organic Geochemistry, the British science journal Nature reported on the success of their experiments. On page 316 of the journal Nature, March 28, 1985, we read the following: "Winans and his colleagues at Argonne National Laboratory have taken less than 1 year to prepare a thoroughly characterized synthetic coal. The material they produce is indistinguishable from the real thing by all the techniques so far applied to it, and its synthesis raises many interesting questions in coal chemistry." To understand their results, let's first note the basic structure of wood. Two major wood components are cellulose and lignin. The lignin basically acts as a binding agent for the cellulose fibers. Several variations of the argon experiment were run, but the successful formula combined lignin and clay with heat, about 150 degrees Celsius, in the absence of oxygen. Over a period of about 8 months, artificial coal was produced. The rapidity with which coal can form when steam interacts with wood under pressure leads us to ask, can steam or hot water also produce the rapid transformation of organic matter to oil? An article, Water, Water Everywhere, published in the February 20, 1993 issue of Science News, answers this question. Researchers at Exxon discovered water acted an essential part in the formation of oil. Efforts to synthesize oil met with failure until very hot water was added to the reactor vessel containing the source rock sample. When this was done, a layer of oil was found on top of the water at the end of the experiment. This result proves there is an alternate path to the production of oil in the earth, with superheated water playing a major role. The article indicated this discovery could wreak havoc with established ideas about oil formation. Actually, however, other natural events are already wreaking havoc with conventional theories. Incredibly enough, certain researchers, one at Oregon State University, have published reports showing evidence of present-day oil formation in the Guaymas Basin in the Gulf of California. Right now, in the Gulf of California, below 6,000 feet of water, is an accumulation of organic sediments derived from marine algae and other organic sources. Below this, superheated water is being pushed up by a deep heat source through these sediments. Oil is being formed in the interaction of organic sediments with superheated water. This hydrothermal oil from the Guaymas Basin is virtually indistinguishable from crude oils obtained from wells drilled in the earth. The implications of this discovery can hardly be overestimated. The possibility must be entertained that the genesis of the reservoir crude oils abundant throughout the world may be explained by hydrothermal processes similar to what's happening in the Guaymas Basin. But instead of an open dispersion of oil directly into the seawater, a closed system could easily be visualized where a reservoir of crude could be collected. It is conceivable that a worldwide flood was instrumental in the production of the tremendous oil reserves of the Middle East and elsewhere. The vast amounts of vegetation buried by such a flood, mixed with superheated water similar to that detected in the Guaymas Basin, could produce oil in the volumes we see today. Depending on the burial conditions, the organic matter would be transformed to either oil or coal. Is there a model of Earth history incorporating these features? One which allows the formation of the world's large oil and coal reserves over a much shorter time than has been previously thought possible?
What about a model based on the record of Earth's history given in Genesis? The Bible describes Earth being called into existence about 6,000 years ago, and Earth originally covered with lush vegetation, then devastated by a worldwide flood about 1,700 years later. This timescale certainly fits with all the scientific discoveries I've made, and just as certainly, water once covered this Earth. In 1927, Noel Odell discovered marine shelly fossils near the very top of Mount Everest. Mountains rising out of the waters is how the Bible describes the end of the worldwide flood. According to that description, the shells near the top of Mount Everest are no surprise at all. And coal and oil, are they the result of the rapid devastation and burial of lush vegetation by a worldwide flood? If so, what about the worldwide flood could have caused such rapid burial? The Bible speaks of the fountains of the great deep breaking up, a strong reference to volcanic eruptions in the pre-flood ocean basins.
This is significant because Ocean Survey researchers recently found an area on the Pacific Ocean floor thickly concentrated with over 1,000 volcanoes. The size of this area is approximately the same as Washington State. Additional ocean floor surveys may well yield many more such discoveries.
The likelihood of extensive volcanic activity during the biblical flood leads us to consider one of the most famous volcanic eruptions in modern time. On May 18, 1980, a giant landslide on the north face of Mount St. Helens in Washington State accompanied an explosion equivalent to 20 million tons of TNT.
This lateral blast of superheated steam, volcanic ash, and dirt leveled over 150 square miles of forest, snapping huge Douglas firs like toothpicks. The landslide debris plunged into Spirit Lake, causing a colossal water wave which washed over the adjacent mountainside over 800 feet above its pre-eruption water level. An average thickness of 300 feet of new sediment dumped into the lake has caused its surface level to be almost 250 feet higher than before the eruption. A massive number of trees felled by the blast were washed into Spirit Lake by the giant water wave. The power of catastrophically driven water to accumulate and bury extensive amounts of vegetation can easily be seen here. The floating log mat on Spirit Lake is only about half its original size because the rest of the logs have sunk to the bottom. If Mount St. Helens had erupted underwater, huge tidal waves hundreds of times larger than the Spirit Lake water wave would have caused the erupted material to be carried over much of the Earth before settling. If thousands of these volcanoes were active, we can begin to imagine the destructive effects a worldwide flood would have had on the topography of the Earth's surface.
This leads us to ask, could such a worldwide flood described in the Bible also be capable of explaining other geological phenomena, such as the Grand Canyon? Some geologists would have you believe that sedimentary deposits were laid down over many millions of years. What they want you to believe is just not true. The fact is, the geology of the Grand Canyon fits a model based on the occurrence of a worldwide flood.
In an attempt to learn where the flood waters came from, where they went after the flood, and what geological events occurred during the flood. We went to Dr. Walter Brown, the former Chief of Science and Technology Studies at the Air War College and an associate professor at the U.S. Air Force Academy. His development of the hydroplate theory provides the key that unlocks many mysteries about the flood and its effects.
We can see on our planet 17 very strange features that can now be systematically explained as a result of a cataclysmic global flood whose waters erupted from subterranean chambers with an energy release exceeding the explosion of 10 billion hydrogen bombs. This explanation shows us just how rapidly major mountains formed. It explains the coal and oil deposits, rapid continental drift, why ocean floors have huge trenches and hundreds of canyons and volcanoes. It explains the formation of the layered strata and most of the fossil record, the so-called ice ages, and major land canyons, especially the Grand Canyon. The pre-flood Earth probably had one very large supercontinent containing lush vegetation, seas, rivers, and minor mountains. According to the hydroplate theory, the pre-flood Earth had a lot of subterranean water, about half of what is now in our oceans. This water was in interconnected chambers forming a thin spherical shell about half a mile thick, perhaps 10 miles below the Earth's surface. Increasing pressure in the subterranean water chamber stretched the overlying crust just as a balloon stretches when the pressure inside increases. Failure in the crust began with a microscopic crack which grew in both directions at about 3 miles per second. The crack, following the path of least resistance, encircled the globe in about 2 hours. As the crack raced around the Earth, the overlying crust opened up like a rip in a tightly stretched cloth. The subterranean water was under extreme pressure because of the weight of the 10 miles of rock pressing down on it. So the water exploded violently out of the rupture. Calculations show that all along this globe-encircling crack, fountains of water jetted supersonically over 20 miles into the atmosphere. The spray from this enormous fountain produced torrential rains such as the Earth has never experienced before or after. The Bible states that all the fountains of the great deep burst open on one day. And it describes these events about 4,500 years ago, which we can now tie together scientifically in cause and effect order as the hydroplate theory. The fountains of the great deep and the expanding steam produced violent winds. Some of the water jetting high above the cold stratosphere froze into supercooled ice crystals and produced some massive ice dumps, burying, suffocating, and instantly freezing many animals. The high-pressure fountains eroded the rock on both sides of the crack and even threw up the limy contents of many pre-flood seas. Huge volumes of sediments settled out of this muddy water all over the Earth. These sediments trapped and buried plants and animals, forming the fossil record. The flooding uprooted vegetation, moving it to regions where it accumulated and quickly became coal and oil by processes we can duplicate in the laboratory today. Experiments show that as erosion widened the rupture, its width became so great that the compressed rock beneath the subterranean chamber sprung upward, giving birth to the mid-oceanic ridge that wraps around the Earth like the seam of a baseball. The continental plates, the hydroplates, still with lubricating water beneath them, slid downhill away from the rising mid-Atlantic ridge. After the massive, slowly accelerating continental plates reached speeds of about 45 miles an hour, they ran into resistances, compressed, crushed, thickened, and buckled. The portions of the hydroplates that buckled up formed mountains. Those that buckled down formed ocean trenches. This is why these features are generally parallel to the oceanic ridges from which they slid. The hydroplates, in sliding away from the oceanic ridges, opened up very deep ocean basins into which the floodwaters retreated. Every continental basin was naturally left brimful of water, producing many post-flood lakes. Each lake that grew from rainfall or drainage from higher elevations spilled over its rim at the lowest point of the rim. That eroded a little notch in the rim, allowing even more water to flow through the notch faster, cutting the soft flood-deposited sediments even deeper. This process accelerated until all the lake's water dumped through a very deep slit, forming a canyon. The largest of these was the Grand Canyon. North and east of the Grand Canyon was a huge lake that I have identified and named Grand Lake. Its dumping released more water than is in all 5 of the Great Lakes combined. Grand Lake spilled over its rim, eroded its dam, 20 miles south of Page, Arizona, catastrophically forming the Grand Canyon within a few weeks.
Rapid deposition of flood deposits from tidal action means there was little time for erosion to occur between successive layers. On the long time scale envisioned by evolutionary theory, there should be considerable evidence found of erosion and infilling by successive geologic formations during the weathering expected over millions of years. The geological layers of the Grand Canyon are remarkable in showing little or no evidence of erosion between different layers. Instead, we see pancake layering, very much consistent with the rapid deposition envisioned by the flood model. Erosion did not occur until all of the layers had been deposited. But how rapidly could the canyon itself have eroded?
Freshly laid down sediments would still not have completely hardened into rock, which allows the possibility that erosion of the canyon could have taken place far more easily than if it had hardened into rock, as evolutionary theory has assumed.
However, under the right conditions, water can rapidly cut its way through the hardest of rocks, such as the granites at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Those conditions involve cavitation.
Cavitation is the rock pulverizing process associated with water flows greater than 100 feet per second. As water detaches from irregularities in the bedrock channel, vacuum bubbles are produced, inflicting hammer-like blows on the bedrock surface, literally converting the rocks into powder.
A modern example of rapid erosion of bedrock from cavitation comes from Glen Canyon Dam on the Colorado River just above the Grand Canyon. Excessive snowfall from the high country of the upper Colorado River Basin in late spring of 1983 caused excessive runoff that poured into Lake Powell at rates of up to 148,000 cubic feet per second. This rapid inflow threatened to overflow Glen Canyon Dam. To control the high flow rates, the power plant was run at full capacity, releasing 28,000 cubic feet per second through the turbines. Then the outlet tubes were opened to drain another 17,000 cubic feet per second. This was still not enough. The emergency situation required engineers to risk damage to the spillway tunnel. And on June 15, the 40-foot diameter left spillway tunnel was opened to drain an additional 13,000 cubic feet per second, which was then raised to 17,000 cubic feet per second. Then on June 28, the flow was increased to 32,000 cubic feet per second. At this point, the water exiting the tunnel became red, and noticeable ground vibrations, earthquakes, were felt by engineers. Large blocks of concrete and bedrock came hurling from the 40-foot diameter tunnel. After closing the spillway tunnel, the survey team discovered extensive cavitation damage. The 3-foot thick steel-reinforced concrete lining of the tunnel was penetrated by huge pits. At an elbow where the tunnel levels out, a hole 32 feet deep, 150 feet long, and 40 feet wide was cut through the lining into red sandstone bedrock. This hole required 63,000 cubic feet of concrete to fill. The repair process to the enormous hole shows the vast extent of the damage. The speed of erosion in the Glen Canyon Dam spillway tunnel occurred very rapidly during the period when the red color of water appeared and ground vibrations were generated. It is possible that cavitation was pulverizing concrete, steel, and sandstone at the rate of 1,000 cubic feet per second during the peak period of erosion. The destructive effects of cavitation at Glen Canyon Dam tell us the Grand Canyon could have been eroded very quickly by the sudden release of a huge volume of water above the canyon. But where did the water come from, and what caused its sudden release? Dr. Brown's studies on the Grand Canyon provide one of the best answers.
Most people are told that the mighty Colorado River carved the Grand Canyon over millions of years. But if people could study the canyon from an aircraft, they could see its vastness and how tiny that river is in relation to the canyon itself. There is no river on earth that could carve this big hole in the ground, even over billions of years. If the Colorado River carved the Grand Canyon, the first question we should ask is, where did all the eroded sediments go? There should be a very large river delta at the end of the Colorado River. It's not there. Furthermore, geologists can't find a huge river delta anywhere near this part of the world. So we need to ask ourselves, where did the dirt go? At several places on this platform that overlook the Grand Canyon, there are small mountains or buttes whose horizontal layers tell a fascinating story. The layers line up with each other, so obviously they were at one time connected. Something must have come along and removed a several thousand foot thick layer of softer material that was once where we now are. So we need to explain not only where the dirt from inside the vast 200-mile long canyon went, but also where did the thousands of feet of dirt go that was once above where we are now and spread out for tens of thousands of square miles. This particular formation, called Red Butte, not only still has some of these horizontal layers, but there's another clue sitting on top. The topmost layer is a lava flow. Lava only flows downhill. Therefore, at one time, the land surrounding the top of this butte must have been even higher. So again, where did all that dirt go? Grand Lake spilled over and eroded its dam catastrophically, forming the Grand Canyon to the southwest within a few weeks. One other large post-flood lake the geologists recognized was once near here was Hopi Lake. As Grand Lake catastrophically dumped, I believe it eroded the western boundary of Hopi Lake, causing it to also spill out. Where did all the dirt go? It was spread out over southern Arizona and parts of California and Nevada rapidly.
The evidence supporting the biblical worldwide flood about 4,300 years ago is mounting. For the Grand Canyon, the flood explains how the sedimentary layers were rapidly deposited as the waters rose, and how they were quickly eroded as the waters subsided. We have also seen where the dirt went. And just as we have seen evidence of the rapid burial of pre-flood vegetation to produce today's coal and oil, we will now see fossil evidence of rapid burial of pre-flood life forms. Indeed, some of the most remarkable evidence of rapid deposition of flood sediments comes from well-preserved fossils found in certain parts of the earth.
Perhaps the best fossil evidence for the rapid burial of plant and marine life is found in southwestern Wyoming at Fossil Butte National Monument. During the past 100 years, scientists and private collectors have collected thousands of almost perfectly preserved fossils from sites within the monument, especially here at Fossil Butte itself. It's an amazingly diverse collection of fossil turtles, palm fronds, crocodiles, leaves, insects, branches with nuts still intact. There are are even fossil stingrays, whose skeletons of cartilage are known to disintegrate rapidly, proving that burial of all these life forms was indeed quite rapid. But this isn't all. Perhaps the most spectacular evidence of rapid burial of all the fossils within the monument are the billions of the more than 20 kinds of fish. This slab of rock in the Monument Visitor Center, which measures about 9 feet by 5 feet, shows vividly just a few of that number. Amazingly, many of the fish retain not only their entire skeletons, but their teeth, delicate scales, and skin as well. The vast number of fossil fish at Fossil Butte has left evolutionary geologists with a vast unsolved mystery. In 2 sections entitled Ideal Conditions for Fossil Making and Unsolved Mysteries, the National Park Service's brochure on Fossil Butte reveals the contradictions that result when using an ancient Earth time frame to explain rapid burial. On one hand, it speculates on the existence of a lake, wherein many animals and plants probably died natural deaths. On the other hand, the evidence forces the conclusion that, on several occasions, huge numbers of fish were killed suddenly. The brochure then equates those several occasions to rapid burial by precipitation of calcium carbonate, the primary rock mineral enclosing the fossils, year after year for hundreds of thousands of years. This is a truly incredible scenario, to have such a vast number of fish reproducing within a short time, only to be wiped out by a succeeding catastrophe a year or so later, and this to be repeated several 100,000 times. Paleontologists should long ago have seen